أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Verse number 25 ولبثوا في كهفهم 300 سنين وازدادوا تسعا, and they remained in their cave for 300 years and increased by 9. Now, of course, after mentioning the disagreements about the details with regards to their numbers, now it comes to disagreement in details about how many years they stayed in the cave. Now, this statement here is has been a subject of controversy among the commentators. Who is saying this? Is it what God is saying, or is it reporting what Ahlul Kitab were saying about it? There is one problem with all these reports about the views of Ahlul Kitab, is that many traditions report the views of the Jews on this issue, which undermines all the reports in this vein, because this was not a Jewish issue, it was a Christian sort of incident, and the Jews shouldn't have had any knowledge about it. Therefore, if we say that it is a discussion between the Prophet and the Jews, we have to discard all those traditions, only those discussions which are among the Christians and the Prophet, or what the Jews reported from the Christians, or what the Meccans reported from the Christians. It was not a Jewish matter, so that we rely on the traditions saying that the Jews were believing in such and such, and the Quran was saying something different. Now here, what the understanding is that this statement is the statement from God, saying that they stayed in the cave for 309 years. And 9 years because, of course, they stayed, according to the report, 300 solar years, which would be 309 lunar years. So they added 9 in this sense. Now, some people say that 300 years is the correct amount of time. And wazdadu tes'a, and they added 9. It doesn't refer back to Ahlul Kahf. It refers back to the Christians. The Christians have added 9 years to that, which was not initially there. So walabithu fi kahfihim, they remained in their cave for 300 years, and the Christians have added 9. This is one view which is said. However, this doesn't sound very likely, because the following verses is saying that this is the number which Allah knows only, and no one else has anything to do. In addition to the fact that in Christian sources, the number of years they have stayed in the cave is mentioned as 200 years, nothing like 300, 309. So what we take as the best interpretation is that God is informing us. وَلَبِثُوا فِي كَهْفِهِمْ, they remained in their caves for 300 years, and they added 9 years as well. That's 309 years. Mentioning it in this way, first of all, tells us the difference between the solar and lunar calculation, and secondly, it goes very well with the rhymes of the previous verses and the following verses. So this is what we gather from the context, that God is informing us that they stayed there for 309 years. But from the following verse, we realize that there were great dispute again about the number of the years that they stayed. And the answer is, do not argue with them. God knows best. This is what we have revealed to you. So verse number 26, قُلِ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثُوا لَهُ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ أبصر به وأسمع ما لهم من دونه من ولي ولا يشرك في حكمه أحدا. Say Allah knows best how long they remained. So this statement, say Allah knows best how long they remained, shows that there was a dispute there among those who had the story and the Prophet who had been revealed uh, the story was revealed to him. There was a dispute, and the dispute is ended by this statement: قُلِ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثُوا لَهُ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ أَبْصِرْ بِهِ وَأَسْمِعْ. To him belongs the unseen of the heavens and the earth. How well does he see? How well does he hear? They have no guardian besides him, and none shares with him in his judgment. Now, the knowledge of Ahlul Kitab, or the Christians, about the story would have come from one of these sources. One source was the ghaib, the unseen. It has been revealed to them, or something which it didn't. So ghaib belongs to Allah. It's a justification why Allah knows best about the number. Or they may have seen it, which they didn't, of course, but even if they have seen it, Allah sees better. Or they may have heard about the time of their stay in the cave, and if it's coming from the hearing, Allah hears better. أسمع به أبصر به وأسمع. Now, going into details of this verse, قُلِ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثُوا لَهُ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. The unseen of the heavens and the earth. We may express the unseen in two ways. الغيب في السماوات والأرض, the unseen in the heavens and the earth. Or غيب السماوات والأرض, the unseen of the heavens and the earth. And there's great difference between the two. I mention now what. الغيب في الأرض, the unseen in the earth. The unseen in the earth may be many things. For example, we don't know what's going to happen in future. We don't know what's happening now in other places. It's unseen to us, but it's not unseen to other people. The future is unseen to us, but not unseen to other people who come in future. This is ghaib in the earth, unseen in the earth. But there are certain things about the earth that no one ever knows. This is ghaibul ars, the unseen of the earth. There are dimensions, there are aspects, there are events which may happen on this earth. No one ever knows about it. What about samawat? Samawat is, of course, when we talk about samawat, in this sense, we don't talk about the universe. We talk about the abode of the angels. Now, al-ghaybu fi samawat, there are certain things which are known to some angels and not known to other angels. We know this. The angels have their ranks in knowledge. Actually, the ranks of the angels are determined by the amount of knowledge that they received. They receive from God. It's a sort of hierarchical order. The highest angels, the closest, they receive ghaib from Allah, and then they reveal it to the lower angels, and so it comes from higher heavens to lower heavens. The angels who direct the affairs later on at the end, they are the receiving end of this revelation, hierarchical revelation. And we have ghaibun fi samawat, some things which are unseen in the heavens, disclosed to some angels, not disclosed to other angels, for example. But we have a ghaibus samawat. There are certain things in heavens which are absolutely ghaib for the angels, unseen for the angels. Here, of course, it is alluding that there are many things in this world. في السماوات وفي الأرض. In the heavens for the angels, on the earth for the inhabitants of the earth, that you don't know about, but God knows about it. There are many that God would not reveal, or we can say it is not possible for the knowledge of God to be revealed totally to anyone, because it's infinite, and everyone else, from Jibreel or Mikael alayhimus salam down to us, we are limited. So it's not possible that his knowledge is fully given to anyone. It's impossible. And therefore there's always something which is ghaib. And you claim knowledge on certain things and oppose. With the knowledge that you have, you want to oppose the knowledge of God, while you have to know that lahu ghaibus samawati wal ars, the unseen of the heavens and the earth belongs to him. In Ayatul Kursi, there's a very beautiful statement about this. وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِعِلْمِهِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ, they cannot encompass to any part of his knowledge, except to the extent that he wills. Now, of course, our knowledge on the earth is very limited. First of all, it's limited to material things. And secondly, even about the matter is limited. Now, our knowledge has expanded very greatly, especially during the past couple of centuries. We know many things now about the qualities of the matter, and we are using it. We are using the qualities of the matter in terms of magnetism, atoms, many other things. For example, now we know that silicon chips can somehow contain lots of material, like memory in themselves. They can help us in many things. Of course, these are certain qualities of the matter that God has now revealed to us. He has now actually made us to encompass. There are many other things that we may not know, absolutely unknown to us, and this knowledge is given to us to the extent that God wills. Of course, then if we do not deserve that knowledge, he would withdraw that, as with previous nations he has done, that he destroyed them and their knowledge and whatever they had. But the knowledge of things are given to us to a certain extent all the time. This is true for material things and is true for spiritual things as well. Even when we eventually go to paradise, the amount of knowledge revealed to us is quite limited. And it depends on our ranks. Like the angels. The angels have their ranks in receiving knowledge. In paradise also we have ranks. And our ranks are determined by the amount of knowledge which is given to us. So the rank of the prophet or rank of us is distinguished by the amount of knowledge of that ghaib, unseen, which is given to us. And of course that depends on our capacity, the way we can receive it, how we can receive it, and all these things. Anyhow, if you are disputing about the number of the years that they stayed in the cave, قُلِ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثُوا, say Allah knows best how long they stayed. لَهُ غَيْبُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. This is the first thing. Now, one may say that, okay, Allah is so sublime, Allah is so high, about these details of things that we see, that we hear. We have had some philosophers who had difficulty to prove the knowledge of God on specific things, on details of things in this world, and therefore they left it unproved, and therefore some thought that the philosophers believe that God does not have detailed knowledge about what happens in this world. However, here he says, أَبْصِرْ بِهِ, surprise. How well does he see? Does he have eyes? Of course not. أَبْصِرْ بِهِ means how his knowledge is attached to those things which are seen by you, and how his knowledge is attached to those things which are heard by you. So he doesn't have eyes, he doesn't have ears, but what is heard and what is seen have certain aspects that you can never imagine. And he has the knowledge of it. إِنَّهُ لَطِيف. One meaning of latif is this very delicate, minute knowledge about things which are so insignificant. So, أَبْصِرْ بِهِ وَأَسْمِعْ. This is one thing. The other thing which is mentioned about why you don't have knowledge and Allah has knowledge about them is مَا لَهُم مِّن دُونِهِ مِّن وَلِيٍّ. This lahum, this zamir, the pronoun hum, them, if we refer it to Ashabul Kahf, it's very clear, it's a continuation. They don't have any guardian but Allah. You were not there to look after them. You were not there to turn them from side to side. You were not there to give them life while they were sleeping. It was Allah who was doing it. So they didn't have any guardian beside Allah. So why you claim that you have some knowledge now that Allah has revealed this knowledge to you? If we say that this zamir, the pronoun hum, refers to Ahlus Samawati wal Ard, the inhabitants of the heavens and the earth, it's the same thing. The inhabitants of the heavens and the earth, they do not have any guardian beside Allah, including Ashabul Kahf, of course. So it's a more general sort of claim. However, Ashab al-Kahf are included in that because they don't have any ما لهم من دونه ولي ولا يشرك في حكمه أحدا, because they didn't have any guardian, so Allah knows best how long they stay. ولا يشرك في حكمه أحدا, and he would not share his hukm, his judgment, with anyone. He judged, he decreed that they should stay this long, and they stayed that long. Now, usually the Quran doesn't concern itself about details. We know that. I mean, how long, for example, the people of Ad or Thamud have had their civilizations, how many kings they had, what were the names of their kings. Why it is so specific here about this story? Why these details are being discussed here? The number of Ashab al-Kahf, what's important about it at all? That's how many they were. Or why Allah is talking about the number of years that they say, why it is so important, why it has suddenly found such a significance. The reason is because of the arguments. They asked the Prophet about it. And when the Prophet was revealed the knowledge and told to them, they started to argue, to dispute that, no, you are wrong. They were not 7, they were 5 people, for example. They were 3 people. Or they didn't stay 300 years, they stayed 200 years. Because they discussed. Now, because the Quran doesn't want to concern itself about details, it's the outcome of the stories which are important. If you remember, initially he said, فَلَا تُمَارِ فِيهِمْ إِلَّا مِرَاءً ظَاهِرًا. Do not argue with them. Just tell this is what's revealed to me, that this is their number. And here also God says this is the number and Allah knows best. That's all. Do not argue with them about to try to prove, for example, what were their numbers or such things. Okay, now we are moved to the conclusion. And conclusion which goes back to the beginning. That's Allah said that إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا مَا عَلَى الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا لِنَبْلُوَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. The trial here is general. We want to try everyone. You cannot force anyone to believe. What you do about this story, about anything else, وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ. Just recite what is revealed to you. That this is your duty. You have nothing more. لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ. At the beginning it says, do you want to kill yourself? Do you want to destroy yourself that they do not believe? At the beginning it says, because they do not believe, would you like to destroy yourself out of your interest in that? Now here there's a conclusion. After, of course, that introduction and the story with all these disputes and arguments, now Allah comes back to the first start, to where it began. Just recite for them what is revealed to you and leave the rest to me. My grace, my mercy is that they have to be guided. They have to be given the guidance. And you are that grace. You give them the guidance. However, after that, what happens? You are not responsible. They have to go through that trial that I have set for them in this world. وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ لَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِهِ وَلَنْ تَجِدَ مِنْ دُونِهِ مُلْتَحَدًا. Recite what has been revealed to you from your Lord's book. Nothing can change his words, and you will never find any refuge besides him. Now, this Kitab Rabbik, وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ. What is recited for you from the book of your Lord? Does it mean the Quran, or does it mean a book from which things are recited to the prophets? Now, it depends how we translate men, because men in Arabic is used for many different, is a device, is a sort of verbal device used for many different things. If we say this men is for ibtida, for giving something from some source, beginning a source, for example, beginning things from a source, bringing things from some source, then it should be what is revealed to you from the source, from the book, and therefore that book is Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, a book from which the Quran is recited. And of course, it gives more glory to the Quran. This book is not an ordinary book. It is recited to you from the book of your Lord, which is the guarded book. What we have actually distinct everything there, this is recited for you from there. If we say, no, this man is for, is to show the partiality, the tab'ir, that oral al-bayan, it's just to explain what is revealed to you is from the book, which is the Quran, or is part of the book, which is from the Quran, then it says that what is revealed to you is part of the book, which we are going to complete its revelation to you, and you should have no doubt about whatever is revealed to you. Do not listen to their arguments. Do not listen to their disputes. وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ. Now, usually when different words are used, like for example, instead of Kitabullah, we use Kitabu Rabbik. This shows a sort of closeness when we say Rabbik, because your Rabb is someone who's sustaining you, is looking after you, has care for you. When it says Kitabu Rabbik, it has more intimate sort of relationship with the Prophet, rather than Kitabullah, which is of course the exalted, the sublime being. And always when we recite the Quran, we have to bear in mind these differences, where Allah is using Rabb, where is he using Allah, where is he using Rahman, where is he using Rahim. When he uses Rahman, it doesn't have that touch which Rabb has, because Rahman is the all beneficent, it belongs to everyone. When Rabbik is used, it means specifically, especially, I am talking to you, that I am cherishing, I'm sustaining, listen to me. So generally, when we recite the book, we have to be careful of these nuances. It's very important, because this book, the nuances in this book are used for certain purpose. وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ. I'm not deceiving you. I'm not telling you lies. Of course, these are told to the Prophet for others to realize. We'll come to that later on, that there are certain things in the Quran that we never imagined that Prophet can even have the imagination to think about. But the Quran addresses those things to the Prophet, not in the sense that Prophet is going to commit them or do them, in the sense that if I'm directing this to your Prophet, you take heed, be attentive, take attention of that. We'll come to that later on. Anyhow, وَاتْلُ مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ لَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِهِ. Their disputes cannot change these words. These are not things which could be subject of discussion or argument or something like that. And when we think about it and we come to laws which are mentioned in the Quran or the Ten Commandments in the Bible, we have to realize that these are not simple, ordinary statements or decrees that we can manipulate. It's very important that leads our ijtihad, if we know that we have to be careful when we are talking about laws mentioned in the Quran, how we have to make ijtihad about them, even if the situations are changed, the time and place are changed, how we want to deal with them, how we want to discuss them in this new context. We have to be careful about it. La mubaddila li kalimati. Nothing can change his words. Here we have one problem about this La mubaddila li kalimati. Nothing changes his words. And that is, we know that some words of Allah in the Quran has changed, abrogated, isn't it? We come to this problem of nasakh and abrogation. La mubaddila li kalimati. There's nothing can change his words. But we know, for example, initially Allah decreed a law and later on he changed it. So is this not a sort of contradiction between what happens and this statement, La mubaddila li kalimatihi? Now, the exegetes have discussed this. in details. One solution for this, or one of the views, is that, well, of course, لا مبدل لكلماته لغيره. Nothing but him can change what he decrees. And we know that nasakh and abrogation cannot happen by anything but by what Allah himself says. But of course, this is not a very sort of pleasant interpretation. The other interpretation is that there is no abrogation in the Quran at all. This is the view of Abu Muslim Isfahani, Mu'tazili exegete and scholar, very, of course, respectable Mu'tazili scholar. He said, we don't have nasakh in the Quran. If there is something that we think is abrogation, we have to find out what is its meaning. Now, lately, we have some Shia scholars who have actually bent towards this view, like Ayatollah Khoy, rahmatullah alayhi. He says there is only one place in the Quran that abrogation has happened, and that's in Surah Al-Mujadala, Ayatul Najwa. And Ayatollah Allama Tabatawi, rahmatullah alayhi, who gives a view similar to Fakhruddin Razi. They say that abrogation never takes place. It is change of place and time which requires a change of ruling. It's not abrogation. If we go back to that place and time, to that context and situation, the same ruling still applies. Therefore, we don't have abrogation in the sense that the old exegetes used to say. It's very interesting. Some of the old exegetes, especially among the Tabi'un, the followers of the Sahaba, the companions, wherever they came to a verse which just slightly differed with another verse, they say, this verse has abrogated the other verse, so we should not apply it. For example, the verse, لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين, Allah would not forbid you to befriend with those kuffar who do not fight against you, is abrogated by the verse, for example, قاتلوا المشركين كافة, fight all of them. While there are about two different situations, two different contexts. So one view, which is quite a strong view about abrogation, is that these are actually referring to different situations, and there has been rulings of Allah which had time limit in it, and that time limit expired the ruling, but that word did not change. The word was there in that time limit, and when the time expired, of course, the ruling did not apply anymore. Anyhow, this was one of the issues which about la mubaddila li kalimatihi had been a point of discussion among the exegetes. ولن تجد من دونه ملتحد. Multahad is refuge. Lahada means to bend or incline to something. So mulhid is someone who inclines away from religion, and that's why mulhid, we call mulhid is kafir, for example. Or multahad is a place to where you bend and take refuge, you inclined. So multahad means refuge. You cannot find any refuge but in him. ولا لا مبدل لكلماته ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا. And this, of course, concludes the whole thing. You cannot find any refuge but in God. No one changes his words. My word is this. My word is this. إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا مَا عَلَى الْأَرْضِ زِينَةً لَهَا لِنَبْلُوَهُمْ أَيُّهُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. We have made whatever is on the earth an adornment so that we try them. You cannot change this. You cannot change the heart of the people. Every individual in the core of their heart, in their most intimate part of their soul, they have to go through this test. And there is no exception in this. Everyone should go through this test. So do not worry if they do not accept, if they reject, if they argue. You cannot find any refuge but in him. وَلَن تَجِدَ مِن دُونِهِ مُلْتَحَدًا وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه, and content yourself. You cannot guide everyone, but look, you have guided many people, isn't it? You have done a great deal. So be with them. Content yourself with them. Don't look at others. Others are being tried and they are being failing. They are failing. Those who have passed the test, those who are with you, those who have belief. واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي. Content yourself with the company of those who supplicate their Lord morning and evening, desiring His face. يريدون وجهه. And do not lose sight of them. ولا تعد عيناك عنهم. Well, it means do not somehow take your eyes, go beyond them. You want to look at others as well. Others do not belong to you. Others belong to Shaitan. Leave them. لا تعد عيناك عنهم. Why you may do this? تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا. You want the adornment, the glitter of the life of this world. Now, as I said, this is addressed to the Prophet. However, we know that Prophet never would do that. It is telling us something. It is teaching us. We have to be content with those who believe, and we should know that majority may not believe. That's fine, no problem. And actually, the majority not believing is a test for us as well, isn't it? Because the test comes as, well, if this is right, why the majority do not believe? Why it's only me? Maybe I'm mistaken. No, it's a test for us as well. لا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا. Wishing or willing to have the glitter of this world. ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه عن ذكرنا. And do not obey him whose heart we have made oblivious to our remembrance, and who follows his own desires, and his matter was excessive of the limits. Now, there are many things here that we have to discuss. First of all, why this verse is revealed to the Prophet. Secondly, what's the meaning of yuriduna wajhah? They seek their face. What's the meaning of this? And generally, what's the meaning of face of God? Because we have this face of God mentioned in the Quran in many places. أَيْنَمَا تُوَلُّ فَثَمَّ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ. Wherever you look is the face of God. So what's the meaning of face? What's the meaning of seeking the face of God? Following the face of God. What's the meaning of that? The third thing is that what's the meaning of مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرًا. We have made their hearts oblivious of our remembrance. Again, you know, whenever we come to these Ash'ari scholars, Ash'ari commentators, Mu'tazili commentators, they fight with each other. Well, Ash'ari commentators says, very clear, God says, I make themselves oblivious of myself. So what do you say? It's God who makes all these things. It's God who makes people to believe and not believe. And Mu'tazilis have to struggle again. That's, no, this is not the meaning. There's the deeper meaning under this. So we have to discuss that as well. And what's the meaning of kana amruhu furata? These are the things that inshallah we have to discuss in our next session. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi tahir.
Thank you very much indeed, Shaykh. So brothers and sisters, we have about 15 minutes, 20 minutes to open the discussion. Yes, Mahmoud, just a minute.
Can you give a reference from Christian source where this story is mentioned about Saful Kahf?
Yes, there are certain historical books in which it's mentioned. While I was writing it, I did refer to it, and especially in their sort of indexes about different ideas and views of Christianity. They have written it. Mr. Hawks, who wrote one of these books. Now, I don't remember exactly the name of the sources, but they have mention of these people in their books, yes. Not Jewish sources, Christian sources, yes.
Thank you. Sisters? Any sisters? No?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for a lovely explanation. No, regarding many issues which has been mentioned in the Quran, one question always arises in my mind is about the slavery. Sometimes that, we say so many times which is not into this age, but when you look at about slavery, which is mentioned quite a lot in the Quran, it's very difficult to apply it to today's day and age, the details of it. So what would you say?
You mean we have to apply it, but it's difficult to apply?
No, we said we have to, whatever has been said in the Quran has to up till the day of the Qiyamah. So many issues in the Quran which I find it is very difficult to apply today's day and age. So one example always occurs to me is slavery, which has been...
Yes, yes. Slavery was a method used to somehow deal with the prisoners of war. And no religion has ever come against slavery. You know that in Christianity, Jesus never said anything against slavery. Moses never said anything against slavery. There was a reason for this. And when I say there was a reason for this, I don't mean that we have to somehow bring it back now that it's abolished. The reason was, especially the slavery which is mentioned in the Quran, about the source of the slaves. Now, in the Western history, we have this slavery which was absolutely unjust. They went to other parts of the world. They just took people by force. Out of blue, they, for example, appeared in an island. They captured the people with the power of their guns. They boarded them on ships and they brought them here for slavery. This was not the case in, for example, the early days of Islam. And if it was the case, Islam abolished it. And the only source of slavery were prisoners of war. That when you fight, of course, you either have to kill all the men so that they do not fight back against you, or to imprison them, which they didn't have the means to do it. I mean, there was not so much wealth that they could feed their enemies in prisons. Or they should have sought other ways to deal with these prisoners of war. And one way was to bring them in their society, to deal with them as second-degree citizens, not first-degree citizens, because they were enemies. They brought them, and then they were assimilated gradually. Their children assimilated in the society. This was one way, and that's why you find no one can enslave any other person except in a just war, that you are fighting with an enemy in a just war, not in looting and sort of things that was quite common on those days. Then you capture these men, you bring them. Of course, you capture the men, you cannot leave the women and children there, you have to bring everyone. And then you deal with them as prisoners of war, not in prison, but as a second-degree citizens, for example, in your society. Then, of course, when they are assimilated in the society, they had their own lives. Of course, slaves, when we say slaves, they were not only servants. We had many ministers who were slaves in this sense. We had many scientists who were slaves, who had flourished in the society. They had become very rich, and their masters, although they didn't own anything, but their masters led them to own, led them to have, so that they could actually benefit them as well. Now, the rulings that we have in the Quran is not condoning the slavery. It's just saying that you have to treat with your slaves in a nice way. Treat your slaves in a nice way, and you have to eventually let all of them go. You have to release them. I mean, what is the meaning of this? That the kafara of one sin, for example, if you break your fast when you shouldn't, you free a slave. Or if you make an oath and you shouldn't, you can't keep it, you free a slave. It all goes towards the idea that this should eventually abolish. This should go away. It's not something a solid sort of structure in society that you have to keep. No, it should go. For example, in Surah Balad we have فَلَقْتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةَ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةِ. They have not gone uphill sort of routes of morality. What are those uphill routes of morality? Freeing slaves. فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ. Isn't it? So freeing slaves is given as a merit. Taking slaves is never given as a merit. Freeing them is given as a merit. Now, the source of slavery still exists. That's wars, isn't it? But we have found other means, especially because this became a source for wronging other people. It became a source for oppressing people of other nations by going and taking them and bringing them. The way the West actually dealt with them, it was a shame. It was a shame on them, and they abolished it amongst themselves. They did it, and of course, it followed everywhere, and it's good. Of course, we support it. We don't say that we have to bring back slavery. The Quran never says that slavery should exist. It just says, now that you have slaves, now that this is going on, treat them nicely. Try to free them. Try to release them from their bonds. And this is how it goes. So I don't think we ever should think that we have to bring back slavery as the ISIS is doing, bringing back slavery.
Thank you, Riaz.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Alaikum salam.
Pretty simple, the explanation you gave. One thing caught my eye, the translation for 26 at the end. They're using authority, and he lets no one share his authority.
Mhm.
And I think that what you mentioned was a different word. The authority wasn't mentioned
Yeah,
there.
hukm means decree, judgment. It also implies authority, but yeah, it is authority as well. But initially, hukm is when you decree something, when you judge about something. But that needs an authority, of course. So by implication, he does not, of course, share his authority with anyone. Yes.
Is there not a reference to the priests of the Jews who considered themselves to be the word of God in that day and age?
Maybe, yeah. That's a nice inference from the sentence. Yes, yes. Thank you.
Any sisters? Yeah. Excuse me.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I was wondering, can you just give a little bit of an example or expand on the idea you were saying about how one ruling could come from the Quran for a specific time and place in a specific context. However, you know that that for that same issue, it could be a different ruling, if I'm understanding correctly. For
Yes.
you know, based on that. A couple of questions, really. First, if we can just give an example, please. And secondly, would that be sort of like a foreshadowing that that context might come again, that you know, what has already passed? Would that specific context and time may come again? And doesn't it kind of cause confusion because depending on how a person views the context of the time?
Yeah, very clear. Well, we have many examples in the Quran. For example, initially, about the women whose husbands passed away, the ruling was that they have to stay for 1 year in the house, and they have to be provided for in the house. And then the ruling about the waiting period of wafat came, that's 4 months and 10 days. Now, the situation in both these were different. And apparently women initially, they couldn't, after 4 months, find a husband or provide for themselves. They had to wait for 1 year, and they had to be provided for 1 year. Or, for example, a very clear verse, two very clear verses which are one after another, is about the sadaqah of najwa with the prophets. That, O you who believe, in Surah Mujadala, O you who believe, when you want to whisper or to privately talk to the Prophet, before you go pay a sadaqah, and then you go and talk. And this ruling held for probably a few days or a couple of weeks. And then after that it comes, did you fear to pay sadaqah before having private talk with Prophet? Now that you didn't do it, so you continue in your pious acts and Allah will forgive you. Now the reason for this, you may say, why God has made such a decision, or for example, such a ruling? The reason was, people boasted having private conversation with the Prophet, and they took his time with very insignificant, unnecessary talks. So to somehow show them that how sort of mean you are, in the sense that you take the time of the Prophet, just to show that I had a private conversation with the Prophet, for example. Now, if you want to do this anytime, pay a sadaqah and go to the Prophet. And apparently, Prophet was left completely alone. No one went to him, except Ali ibn Abi Talib, as we have in the traditions. He was giving sadaqah and going and talking to the Prophet. No one went to him. Then the verse was revealed that I have abrogated this. Now that you feared to be poor, to hit poverty if you give sadaqah and talk to the Prophet, don't worry, I have taken this away, to tell them that, to bring to their attention. Now, again, if you can imagine, this ruling was held only for a couple of weeks, of course, and no one went to the Prophet. Now you can imagine that, can we use this verse in a similar context? For example, let's suppose Imam al-Asr alayhi salam comes, and everyone wants to go and have private conversation with him, but he has no time, and he doesn't want, because he's not a king, he doesn't want to reject people, doesn't have to have barriers on him. So maybe that ruling would hold again, unless, of course, we realize that we shouldn't do that. What is the overwhelming view now, especially among the Shiites, is that different rulings which are given in different contexts may lead us to use those rulings, which we think are abrogated, in a similar context. So we have a free hand, so to speak, to use them. For example, sometimes it's about war, you have to fight against all the kuffar. Sometimes it's about a peace. وَإِن جَنَحُوا لِلسَّلْمِ فَاجْنَحْ لَهَا. Now, many exegetes say that this verse in Surah Anfal, وَإِن جَنَحُوا لِلسَّلْمِ فَاجْنَحْ لَهَا, if they are inclined towards peace, you accept it. Now, many say that this is abrogated. It doesn't apply anymore. You have to fight them, because then we had the ayatul qital. But it's not acceptable at all. Yes, sometimes we have to make peace, sometimes we have to make war. It's in this way that we can use these verses.
Ali?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
One of the things that you mentioned was that Allah told the Prophet, don't argue with them and just say what you have to say from God. Is that applicable only for that time, or just in that incident, or is it also more general, or can we take that same principle more generally? So I don't go around arguing with people about Islam and God. I just tell them, look, this is what I believe, this is what God says, take it or leave it.
Yeah. First of all, mumarat, or vain argument, is always bad. I mean, it's reprehensible. We have arguments about petty things. Now, here, of course, we know in many other places, Prophet makes very strong and detailed arguments about the belief, about that why he is Prophet or such things. Here, the details of historical issues are something which cannot be a subject of argument. I mean, it's either right or wrong. It's either true or false. You cannot say that, no, I believe that, for example, there were 5, you believe 7, prove for me that there are 7. What's the point of that? Do not argue about it. Sometimes we have, as historians, for example, we will go and investigate about details of history. again, that's not a point for argument. It's just you find out, you support some event by evidence, for example. But when it comes to tenets of faith, to articles of belief, of course, we have to not argue, we have to explain. Explanation is very important. Argument is bad. Explanation is very important all the time. We cannot say to a Christian, this is the Quran, read it. If you accept, accept. Otherwise, you are a bad person. No, we have to explain, we have to expand in different expressions, different type of aspects of things should be illuminated. This is the first thing. And second thing, we are not prophets. We are ordinary people. And therefore, we are always in a position that we have to discuss our views. Unlike the prophet who receives the revelation and just says, this is the fact.
Any sisters? Any brother? Any brother? No? Okay, thanks very much, Muhammad.
Thank you.